Has Israel turned Gaza into a starvation camp? The UN says the Strip is the hungriest place on earth. As Israel continues its blockade and bombardment, every single person is at risk of famine. What are the long-term effects on Palestinians' health? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. The hungriest place on earth. That's how the United Nations has described Gaza. Months of a total Israeli blockade on top of severely reduced aid supplies have left 2.3 million Palestinians facing famine. Hundreds of deaths have been reported due to shortages of food, water and medicine. Tons of aid are waiting at the border, but the UN says only a trickle is being allowed through. So, is Israel using starvation as a weapon of war? And what effects will famine and hunger have on Palestinians, especially children, in years to come? Imogen Kimber has our report.
Gaza, the only place in the world where every single person is at risk of famine, says the United Nations.
Gaza is the hungriest place on earth.
Yet trucks filled with humanitarian aid are waiting at the border, inspected and cleared, but prevented from entering.
That makes it one of the most obstructed aid operations, not only in the world today, but in recent history.
More than 2 million Palestinians are desperate for food and water.
There's nothing, no food, no drink, no life. Life doesn't exist. We and the dead are the same.
They also need fuel, shelter and medicine, especially because people suffering from malnutrition need medical treatment. But in Gaza, most healthcare facilities are badly damaged or completely destroyed, and medical supplies are at a bare minimum. This family's 4-month-old baby died of malnutrition. Her parents took her to hospital, but doctors were unable to save her.
She suffered from malabsorption and needed a special formula. This formula is not available at the health ministry or in private stores. Consequently, the baby suffered from severe infections which led to her death due to malnutrition, immunodeficiency and infections resulting from malnutrition.
Nearly 60 children have reportedly died from malnutrition since Israel reimposed a total blockade on the Strip on March the 2nd. Another 70,000 are currently at risk. The effects of malnutrition during childhood last a lifetime. Children will suffer from stunted growth and a weakened immune system, as well as impaired cognitive abilities, which means an entire generation of Palestinians will bear the scars of Israel's war and blockade on Gaza. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, we'll go to our panel of guests in just a moment, but first let's talk to Dr. Victoria Rose, a plastic surgeon from the UK. Currently, she's working at Gaza's Nasser hospital. She joins us from there, from Khan Yunis in the south of the Strip. Thank you for joining us today. Now, I know you've been to Gaza a number of times before the current Israeli bombardment started 20 months ago, and since then, 3 times. How would you describe conditions now?
They're the worst they've ever been, without a shadow of a doubt. We are overrun with casualties. I've never seen so many victims of bombings coming through the door. And at the same time, we're running short of medical supplies. The whole population is affected. They are all malnourished. They have had 19 months of continuous bombardment. They are tired. And they are desperate, and it really is the worst it's ever been.
What sort of cases, what sort of injuries are you dealing with?
Everyone I see has been essentially blown up. So it's people coming in who have been in a blast and have either been injured in the initial impact, so they may have had a traumatic amputation of their hand, foot, leg, or they've been hit by shrapnel. And when a piece of shrapnel is whipped up in an explosion and hits you at high velocity, it normally will penetrate either the head, abdomen, or chest. And if that happens, you're more or less likely to die. But if it hits you in a limb, it's normally a survivable injury. So we're seeing people with so shrapnel injuries to their limbs that are missing fingers, bits of arms, gone into an arm, broke divided arteries, divided nerves, that sort of thing. And then the rest of the injuries are burns from the heat of the explosion.
Normally you work in the UK, which is a relatively rich Western country. How different is it working in Gaza? What sort of supplies and basic equipment do you have, and what are you lacking?
Well, we haven't had any aid delivery now since the 2nd of March. There were 3 trucks that got in on the 120 that came earlier this week, but they were at one NGO's 3 lorry loads. And so we haven't really seen anything since the 2nd of March. We're really short now of all essential items. It's estimated that 42% of essential drugs here are now out of stock, and 65% of all disposable items are out of stock. For me, the main things are scalpel blades. We've run out of those. So we've had a space of reusing and re-sterilising. We're now down to some temporary blades which really aren't up to the job. We ran out of most sizes of surgical gloves quite a while ago, and we're all wearing the same single size now, which is 7.5, whether that fits you or not. We've run out of drapes, so we're using gowns as drapes. The critical thing next is gauze swabs. We were told by the hospital administration that we're likely to run out at the end of this week. They've stopped giving gauze swabs to the ward and to anyone other than the emergency department and the operating theatres. But we're still pretty concerned. It's an item that we use on every single operation, not only to mop up blood and to prepare the patient for the operation, but it's also our only aid of dressing at the moment as well. So we go through it at quite a rate of knots. So it really is quite worrying now.
You've talked about the horrific injuries that your patients are suffering from, but at the same time, there in the hospital even, there's the constant risk of bombing and bombardment. And, of course, all of these patients you have there are people who don't have enough to eat.
Yes, I mean, at the moment, we're 1.5 kilometres away from the red zone. So we are listening to the bombs all day long now, and they've certainly escalated since the breakdown of the ceasefire 2 nights ago. But the malnutrition is a real issue for us. We notice it more in the children, particularly in the under 5s. And it's not just the immediate effects with the fat and muscle wasting, but what we really see is altered immune system. So these children are not capable of fighting infection. And because everybody at the moment is displaced and living in tents, it's not the cleanest environment, there is a huge number of infections. And we've really seen a rise in this. And infections that would otherwise be treatable in any normal circumstances, we can't treat because we don't have the antibiotics available. So overwhelming sepsis, which would be preventable, is becoming a real issue for us.
The world was shocked about a week ago by the story of one of your colleagues, Dr. Ala al-Najjar, whose home was bombed, killing 9 of her children. I know that in your hospital is her son Adam and her husband, who's also a doctor, Dr. Hamdi al-Najjar. They're seriously injured. I'm sure everyone would like to know an update on how they're doing.
Adam is doing well. I operated on him last week. He's making a good recovery. We were concerned initially because he sustained quite a significant head injury, but children tend to do very well from that sort of neurological insult, and he's certainly showing good signs of recovery. He does have a devastating wound to his left upper arm. He's broken the humerus, which is the main bone in the upper arm, which we've managed to fix. But he's also divided 3 of the main nerves in his arm, which we had to graft for him. But overall, he's doing very well. Hamdi is still in intensive care, and he has suffered quite a significant head injury. And being slightly older, the prognosis for him is very difficult to predict now. So we really are just waiting to see how he responds to supportive treatment.
Dr. Victoria Rose, thank you very much for joining us from Khan Yunis. Please take care. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, now let's bring in our panel of guests today. And joining us from Flint, Michigan is Dr. Bara Zuhaili, a vascular surgeon who's volunteered in Gaza twice. In Gaza City, we've had Amjad Shawa. He's director of the Palestinian Non-Governmental Organizations Network. And in Seattle, it's Hassan Khatib, a professor of genetics and epigenetics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We'll find out what epigenetics are, I'm sure, in the course of the programme. But if I can start with you, Dr. Bara, you heard Dr. Victoria Rose there talking to us from Khan Yunis. I'd like your reaction because you've spent quite a bit of time as a doctor during the war in Gaza.
Yeah, I think the long-lasting effect of what's happening in Gaza will be something that we haven't seen in the long run. And then I'm not exaggerating. I think what we've seen since World War I and II, we haven't seen anything like this since then, and we will never have seen anything like this in Gaza right now. And I'm not exaggerating, and I will make my case right now. Just to give you numbers, anytime as a public health official, anytime we are trying to study what's happening, we try to look at data. And in this case, we're trying to think of malnutrition. Well, we don't have any data of malnutrition. We try to take a step back and we look at what else, what other data can we look at to evaluate what we have. Well, in terms of kids or children in this case, we evaluate what's happening of children in Gaza otherwise, other than malnutrition. Because as I said, we have no data whatsoever about malnutrition in Gaza in general, and especially when it comes to kids. So in Gaza right now, I was in touch with my colleagues in Gaza, and at least as far as we know, we have roughly speaking about 400 kids, newborn, who were born and killed since October 7. 400, almost 400. And few things to comment on that one. Well, first of all, when I was in touch with my colleague about the exact number, my colleague who was telling me the number, he became emotional. He literally broke in tears. He gave me a number initially. He said it was 357. And then he came back later and said, actually, it was 355. And then he came back and said, actually, no, make it 359. And he broke down in tears and he said, actually, in one bag, we thought it was one kid who was born and came to us dead. But it turns out that they were two kids literally killed together and fused together. So that gives you about the horrific nature of how kids are literally born and killed in a horrific manner in Gaza. So that's the first observation. Second observation, I don't know how to react to this. I'm a father myself. I have 3 kids in that age myself. So I don't know whether to grieve for those kids, because I don't wish for any kid to die. I see my own kids growing healthy and happy. I don't know, should I grieve for them or maybe not? Because when I see the other kids in Gaza who are not being killed, I don't see them faring well at all. And that's where I'm trying to make my point. When you see the other kids who are surviving, who are not being butchered otherwise in Gaza, they are not doing too well at all. So we know from data, the brain development is the maximum within the first 1,000 days. So when you see those children or those kids in Gaza who are, quote unquote, surviving, when you see that they are not getting the basic nutrition in the first 1,000 days, you can only imagine what's going on to their brains, and you can only imagine what kind of growth they are up to moving forward.
OK, let me pick up those points. Let me pick up those points with our other 2 panellists, if I can. Amjad, you are there in Gaza City. At the start of our programme, we heard a very grim quote from the United Nations, from Jens Laerke, who's a veteran UN humanitarian official. He said, Gaza is the hungriest place on earth. 100% of the population of the territory are at risk of famine. You are there. You are our eyes on the ground. Would you concur with that?
I do fully agree, since all the population are starving, and we are a famine zone with full meaning, although that famine is not only a word. It's suffocation, it's suffering, it's health deterioration, it's death. Sometimes already 60 children died because of the acute malnutrition. I'm also a father. My children is here. I know well what's the meaning of malnutrition. But I cannot disconnect malnutrition from the other factors that we are living in. The daily airstrikes on the Palestinians, on the children who are staying in such so-called tents, and it's not a tent, in small space, 19% of Gaza Strip. Some families displaced for 12, 15 times. They lost their belongings. They lost everything. One of my staff, just 1 hour ago, his home destroyed. They lost everything. Now they are in the street. Children, elders, patients, the trauma, the psychological situation. Just consider we are now 600 days and there is no option, no horizon, water. All the Palestinians in Gaza now suffering from severe water insecurity. And most of the families depend on kind of unsafe resources for water. So malnutrition, which means hospitals, and now 22 hospitals out of service. The others are running partially with no supplies, no medicines. So this kind of altogether, while you are starving and struggling to get some food, we as a humanitarian agencies, we have nothing to deliver to the people. I have to confess that.
Okay, let's bring in Professor Hassan, if I can. What are the effects on a population of food deprivation? I know you are one of the world's experts on this subject.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for hosting me. And it's interesting that this is the first public debate about the long-term consequences in terms of genetics and epigenetics on populations that are undergoing and through undernutrition or trauma. So we have experiences from the past. We have the Chinese famine, we have the Dutch famine, we have the Holocaust. And those populations were studied in tens or hundreds of publications showing long-term consequences of trauma and famine, even to the second and third generation. So in the Dutch famine, which occurred in 1944 to 1945, where calorie restriction was about, on average, 600 calories per day per person, they could see consequences on psychological disorders, on cancer, on cholesterol levels, on birth weights, even after 60 or 70 years. The same thing with the Chinese famine, the same thing with the Holocaust that introduced trauma, first and second generations, also suffered from the Holocaust, although themselves were not exposed. And nowadays, we can explain this by epigenetic effects. You alluded to what epigenetics is, in contrast to genetics, where genes act to determine our traits, our diseases, and our phenotypes. We have epigenetics. Epi in Greek means above genetics, which is environment. Although this debate has been for thousands of years, only in the last 20 years, we can explain how environment can affect our diseases and we call them environmental insults, and how they mediate these effects into the next generations. So there is inheritance of trauma. There is inheritance of fear. There is inheritance of undernutrition and famine that will be, let's call it, imprinted on future
just explain that.
generations.
Just explain that inheritance for me, if you can, Professor. I mean, so you have the starvation, you have the trauma. How is that likely to manifest itself in the next generation? What sort of health effects?
So, in terms of health effects, it's wide range, as shown in the Chinese and Dutch famine, from obesity to cardiovascular diseases, cognitive functions, schizophrenia, diabetes, visual problems. All these problems can happen because this undernutrition or famine basically will change the genes in the fetus. And these changes will be kept until these fetuses are born and become the first generation. And these effects on their genes, genetic changes, will be inherited to the next generation, by the next generation as well. And if these modifications of genes will cause these effects in the first generations, they will cause it also in the second and third generation. This is what our studies in animals show, and in humans as well.
Really interesting, but really shocking, that information. Amjad, I getting emails every few hours from this group called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which Israel and the US say is bringing in aid. This is the latest one I have. They say that they have delivered 3.8 million meals in the last 5 days. You're on the ground there in Gaza. Is that true?
No, it's not true at all. What they are delivering to the people, it's kind of food parcels with limited items. And every day, according to the calculation, which is they are delivering about 15 to 20,000 food parcels in the different, on the four security military points that in the south of Gaza Strip. So in the Gaza North, there is nothing, just very limited amount of aid delivered on the south area. Mainly in Rafah, we have 3 points. And in south of Netzarim, it's 1 point only, which is distributing there very limited amount. There is no meals distributed in these areas. And what is obvious, that they are misleading the international community through these numbers. What we have, the accurate numbers, they are sharing every day also, that the numbers of the parcels that they are distributing with the limited food items, which is enough for a family of 5 members for 2-3 days only.
And I share your skepticism, and we've seen the chaotic pictures, we've seen shots being fired, we've seen stun grenades being used. But, this is what they're putting out as their information, Dr. Bara, and I'm not there, I'm not counting the food packets. If this was true, 3.8 million meals, even if this was true, that would be nothing, would it not, after 80 days of Gaza being completely cut off? This would only be 2 meals in the last week for all of the people of Gaza, and it's pretty clear from Amjad, nothing is getting to the north at all.
Yeah, can I make a comment on this one? Because this is where I think the weaponization of aid is coming to the maximum effect. And this, unfortunately, is becoming the norm right now, and it is pretty embarrassing right now. So just to give you an example, and this example is the epitome of this idea of weaponization of aid. So at some point, we had a little kid that came to me. He was almost 1 year old, where we did surgery on him. He lost 1 arm. I did surgery to save 1 finger because he lost the other 2 fingers. And after all of that, I just realized that he lost his entire family. So he was the only survivor among everyone in his family. Literally, everyone was died. So we just realized that he has no diapers left. So I went on a scavenger hunt to see if I can find another diaper to change his diaper, because suddenly he became my own kid because he has no one to change his diaper. So I was going around in a scavenger hunt to find a diaper for him. And for the life of me, I couldn't find a diaper, just a diaper to change for him. And at the same time, someone in Gaza was giving me a mango. So I was shocked. I was like, wait, a mango? I couldn't find a diaper to change a diaper for this kid. And here we are eating a mango in Gaza in the middle of the war. So I was asking around, what's the story of this mango? And to my surprise, it turns out that this mango is a product of the illegal settlements of the West Bank. And no one was buying those mangoes in Europe. No one was buying those mangoes anywhere in the world because it's illegal settlements. So the only way for Israel to get rid of them and to make some profit is to dump it on Gaza and to tell the world that, look, we are sending some aids to Gaza. So here we are. We don't have soap in Gaza. We don't have diapers. We have nothing. We don't even have gas, as Victoria Rose mentioned, but we have mango in Gaza. So enjoy the mango to enjoy it, but we don't have diapers. We don't have anything else, but you have mangoes. And the only reason we have mango in Gaza, because they don't want the mango to go bad, because no one else was buying that, because it's an illegal product from the West Bank. So the weaponization of aid in general is reaching an unheard level in Gaza.
Okay,
so
let's bring in Amjad on that there in Gaza. Amjad, these latest boxes, which clearly you haven't seen in Gaza City, dry foods in them, pasta and rice, but there's no clean water, there's no fuel. I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to eat pasta if you can't cook the pasta. And this group, GHF, itself has said its meals constitute 1,750 calories, whereas the international standard from the UN, World Health Organization and World Food Programme is 2,100 calories a day.
Let me start from the beginning. This Gaza and Humanitarian Foundation, which was created in partnership with the Israeli occupation and contracting this military company to establish this kind of military points to distribute aid. And we have this defense road, and there is no security for any and safety for any Palestinians who are getting through these roads, which is fenced roads. It gets 2.5 hours for people in order to reach this distribution aid point. And in the same time, there is so many people. There is tens were shot, killed by the Israeli tankers which were surrounding these points. So these people were obliged under the starvation, not only for them, for their children, to go back to their families, to their children who are waiting for anything that can keep them alive. This is the A priority for us as Palestinians now.
Okay, thank you very much, Amjad, and thank you to our guests today, Dr. Bara Zuhaili, Amjad Shawa and Hassan Khatib. Al Jazeera has reporters and camera crews on the ground in Gaza. Stay tuned for continuing coverage and analysis on our website, aljazeera.com. As ever, we want to hear from you. Go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or find us on X. We are at AJ Inside Story. Until next time, from me, James Bays, and the team here, stay safe. Bye-bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.